It was just a voice note, no background music, no edits. But when Kanye heard it, he put his phone down and didn't speak for hours. It started with a clip that wasn't supposed to matter. No trending hashtag, no news coverage, no polished camera angles or headlines. Just a grainy video, shaky, raw, filmed on an old phone, posted on a quiet account with less than 200 followers. Kanye had been scrolling endlessly, as he often did when his mind felt heavy. There were days when even the loudest music couldn't silence the thoughts. This was one of those nights, and then that clip appeared. A group of villagers stood under the open sky, dust in the air. A faint wind moved the trees in the distance. And standing in front of them, no bodyguards, no teleprompter, was Ibrahim Traoré. Kanye didn't know much about him, only the name. A young president somewhere in Africa. Some said he was fearless. Others said he was dangerous. But in that moment, all that mattered was what Traoré was saying. "I am not your king," he told his people. "I am your son. I walk your roads. I carry your pain. And I will not bow to anyone who wears a suit and calls themselves powerful." The villagers didn't cheer. They just listened, like they were hearing someone speak the truth out loud for the first time. Kanye froze. His thumb hovered over the screen. He replayed the line, "I carry your pain." For some reason, those 4 words hit harder than any lyric he'd written in years. He sat up straighter, replaying the clip again. Not because he needed to, but because something inside him needed to feel it again. This man, Traoré, didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like someone who had already died once and come back with no fear left. Kanye knew that feeling. Different world, different wounds, same fire. That night, he didn't tweet, didn't call anyone. He just stared at the screen and whispered to himself, "This man, he gets it." The next day, Kanye did something he rarely does. He reached out privately. No press, no headlines. Just a quiet message sent through someone he trusted. A connection deep in Africa's underground creative space. "Tell him I want to talk," Kanye said. "No politics, no PR, just man to man." He waited. A day passed. Then 2. No reply. He didn't get angry. He didn't chase. He just kept watching that clip, again and again. Not for the speech, but for the look in Traoré's eyes. There was no fear, no ego, just truth. And Kanye, someone the world called loud, arrogant, unpredictable, sat in silence, hoping to hear from someone who had no reason to respond. On the 3rd night, the message came. No text, no emoji, just a single audio file with the subject line, "Voice note from Ouagadougou." Kanye's heart beat differently as he opened it. He expected a thank you, a simple reply, maybe even a powerful quote he could share. But as he pressed play, he heard no greeting, no welcome, just one word: "Listen." That was all Traoré said at first, but in that one word was wait. Not loud, not rushed, just calm, like a man speaking from a place the world rarely sees. Kanye leaned closer. Then the voice continued, "You think you've been silenced, brother, but some of us were never allowed to speak to begin with." Kanye blinked. His thumb hovered near the pause button, but he didn't press it. He couldn't. "You say they cancel you," the voice said. "But where I'm from, they cancel us with hunger, with war, with silence so deep it becomes normal." There was no anger in Traoré's voice, only truth. And it burned. Kanye felt his chest tighten. This wasn't a reply. This was a mirror, and it didn't flatter. "I was 6 when I first saw men in uniforms take food from my village," Traoré said. They smiled as they did it, said it was for protection. But they left us with nothing but dust. Kanye closed his eyes. He could almost see the scene. children barefoot, mothers quiet, soldiers pretending they were saviors. We didn't learn to protest, Traoré continued. We learned to survive. That's the difference. Kanye's mind flashed to his own past, to the stages, the fights with labels, the tweets that shook headlines. He had been loud, but Traoré had been buried alive by systems the world didn't even talk about. I watched your interviews, Traoré said, heard your rants. Your truths dressed as madness. I understood. But understand, this, freedom without direction is noise. And noise without purpose is just a softer kind of slavery. That line made Kanye freeze. He'd never heard it put like that before. I'm not better than you, Traoré added. But I've seen what the world looks like when cameras aren't around. And brother, it's not art. It's ashes. There was a long pause in the voice note. Just breath, dust, and the soft hum of wind on the mic. Kanye sat still. The city outside his window kept moving. Cars honking, lights flashing, life buzzing. But inside his room, it was silent. And in that silence, he realized something. This wasn't a conversation. This was a lesson. Not one taught in words, but in wounds. And Kanye, for the first time in a long time, didn't want to speak. He wanted to learn. The voice returned, soft, heavy, unapologetic. They don't fear your words, Traoré said. They fear the way your words wake people up. But when I speak, they don't just fear me. They try to erase me. Kanye swallowed hard. It wasn't ego. It wasn't bitterness. It was something colder, something older. Like a truth passed down from one generation of pain to another. You lose followers, Traoré continued. We lose villages. You lose endorsements. We lose water. And still, they call us dangerous. Kanye's grip on the phone tightened. There was a part of him that wanted to interrupt, to say, I get it. But he didn't, because deep down, he knew. He didn't. Not fully. Not yet. The voice note kept playing. You once said slavery was a choice, Traoré said. But where I come from, choices are made with empty stomachs and loaded guns. The words stung, but they weren't thrown to wound him. They were thrown to wake him. I know you meant something deeper, Traoré added. But the world doesn't wait to understand. It just reacts. Kanye looked out the window. Sunlight spilled across the floor, but it felt dim. I'm not here to correct you, Traoré said. I'm here to remind you. You don't get to stop fighting just because they stopped clapping. The message paused again. Kanye thought it was over. He exhaled, closed his eyes. But the voice returned, quieter now. There's a war happening, Kanye. Not just with guns, but with narratives. With silence, with shame. They erase history with headlines. They steal futures with contracts. They buy our pain and sell it back as documentaries. Kanye's heart thudded louder. Every sentence felt like a stone dropped in still water, ripples reaching places he didn't know existed inside. Him. You're not our enemy, Traoré said. But you're not free either. That line landed hardest. Because freedom isn't being able to speak, he finished. It's knowing your voice won't be buried when you do. Then, silence. Real silence. No breath. No wind. Just the sound of Kanye's own thoughts, crashing like waves inside his chest. He sat there for a long time. Didn't move. Didn't speak. He wasn't sure what to say anymore. And for once, that felt like the right response. Because sometimes, truth doesn't ask for answers. It just needs to be heard. For the rest of the night, Kanye didn't say a single word. Not to his assistant. Not to his team. Not even to himself. The voice note still sat in his phone, untouched after that first play. But inside him, every word was still echoing. He didn't want to reply. He didn't know how to reply. What do you say to a man who didn't speak to impress you, but to strip you bare? The next morning, his team noticed a change. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distracted. He was just still. Kanye West was never still. He was always speaking, creating, reacting, moving faster than anyone around him could keep up. But now, it was like something inside him had slowed down, not out of defeat, but out of clarity. But the world doesn't give silence room to breathe. That same afternoon, while Kanye sat alone on his rooftop, it happened. A leak. 42 seconds. That's all it took. Someone, maybe from his inner circle, maybe not, had shared a short clip of the voice note. Not the beginning, not the ending, just a small burning piece in the middle. You're not our enemy, but you're not free either. The internet didn't know where it came from, but they felt it. And within hours, that line was everywhere. On TikTok, on Reels, in music edits, in reaction videos from people who didn't even know where Burkina Faso was. Some called it the greatest thing Kanye had ever been sent. Others said it was dangerous, that Traoré was radical. And some just stayed quiet, because truth makes noise even in silence. Kanye didn't post, didn't deny, didn't confirm. But when asked by someone on his team if they should control the narrative, Kanye simply replied, "Let the world hear it." That's all he said, and walked away. For 3 days, he disappeared from the public. No photos, no tweets, no shows, just space. And when he returned, he wasn't the same. He walked onto a podcast set wearing no jewelry, no designer coat, no sunglasses. Just a simple shirt. The host leaned in. "Everyone's been asking," he said. "Was that voice note real?" Kanye paused, smiled faintly, then whispered, "Realer than most of the music we've ever heard." The host blinked. "Did you respond?" Another pause. Then Kanye said, "There are some voices you don't respond to. You just carry them with you." And that was it. No clickbait, no controversy. Just a man who finally heard something that didn't want fame. Just truth. And it changed him. He didn't say it out loud. Didn't write a song about it. Didn't turn it into merch or content. But something inside Kanye had shifted, not in brand, not in sound, but in spirit. He didn't post for attention. He didn't scream into the void. He just began moving differently. Weeks passed, and quietly, under the radar, Kanye began funding a silent project. No press release, no flashy launch. He funded a team to travel to West Africa, not for tourism, not for photo ops, but to listen, to collect real stories, to sit with mothers who lost sons, to hear about mines stripped by foreign hands, schools left in dust, and fields where only silence grows. When asked what the project was called, he answered with one word: debt. Not the kind measured in money, but the kind measured in silence, ignorance, and disconnection. One night, months later, Kanye was asked again in a private interview, "Why now? Why Africa? Why Traoré?" He looked down, took a breath, then replied, "Because someone finally spoke to the part of me that no one ever tried to understand. Not the artist, not the celebrity, not the brand. Just the wounded me." He continued, "That voice note, it didn't ask me for a platform. It didn't try to flatter me. It just told the truth. And for the first time, I didn't try to run from it." The interviewer was quiet. Kanye wasn't done. "You know what I realized?" he said. "All my life, I thought my voice was my power. But sometimes, the real power is in what you choose to hear." Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Traoré never mentioned the voice note publicly. Not once. No interviews. No tweets. No victory speech. Because he never sent it to be heard by the world. He sent it for one soul, and somehow, that was enough. Months later, a new mural appeared quietly in an alley in Dakar. No signature, no artist name, just a spray-painted sentence. Use your voice, but bleed with us first. Below it, a small speaker embedded in the wall. If you press play, you'd hear a 2-minute voice clip. No music, no intro, just Traoré's voice, raw, unedited. And people who heard it never forgot it. Kanye never posted the clip, never released the full note, never said what it meant. But those who knew him, truly knew him, said he was softer now, calmer, still defiant, but more anchored. It was as if the loudest man in the world had finally been heard, not by fans, not by critics, but by a stranger who had lived a pain beyond fame. And in the quiet corners of that truth, Kanye found something he hadn't known he was looking for. Not forgiveness, not validation, not even redemption. He found a man in another land who didn't want anything from him, except for him to finally listen. Sometimes one voice can shake another into silence, not to overpower it, but to remind it of what it forgot. If you were in Kanye's place, would you have replied or just listened? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story moved you, like, subscribe, and help more voices be heard. You can spend your whole life speaking and still never say what matters until someone shows you the price of being unheard.